Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by singer, songwriter, recording artist, author, educator, and travel connoisseur, Stewart Gatsi. Stewart has had the privilege of living on 4 different continents. He just put out a professional LP, and Stewart is a modern-day Renaissance man. Stewart, thank you so much for joining me today.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me.
So why don't you start off by telling everybody a little something about yourself, kind of giving us a little background.
Right. So I was born in Zimbabwe. That's in Southern Africa, the southern region of Africa. And to give you a bit of context, that's a country that's a former British colony and was one of the last British colonies in Africa. Got independence in 1980. And so I was born in that kind of environment. Then I moved to the U.S. when I was 17. I just turned 17. And I moved there for school, and my sister was also living there. So that was one of my intrinsic motivators for moving there initially. And then from there on, I started traveling. I think the first time I did travel after that was an exchange program. And then at that point, the travel bug hit. And thus far, I've hit 4 continents and over 50 countries, hoping to add more. I feel like I'm still a baby.
So you've lived on 4 continents. Tell us what the 4 continents are and what was it like living on all those different continents and adjusting?
That's adjusting that's a great way of putting it. I think dealing with culture shock is something that I still deal with whenever I travel to a new place, but adjusting to a different way of thinking. You arrive in a new country, maybe you don't know the language, you can't read any of what's going on. You got to get to know the people as well and your area. So there is some adjusting to be done. But I think that for me, that's also the fun. It's almost like being a baby. A crazy incident that happened, for example, when I arrived in Vietnam for the first time was I just couldn't cross the road because there was so much traffic. There were motorbikes everywhere. People were driving on the curb. They're driving the wrong way, according to me. And I remember standing at a traffic stop for about 15 minutes, just trying to figure out how I could get across. And then an old man walked up to me. He was about 60 years old, a Vietnamese man, just came and grabbed me by the arm. And then he stuck up his arm and all the traffic just drove around us. And he walked me across the street. So that's a moment where I actually felt like I was a baby for the first time. I was kind of lost, but I found my way around.
Well, you're currently in Vietnam. So what are you doing in Vietnam right now?
So right now I work here as an educator. That's what I do part-time. I also pursue the things that I love. So I work on my music. If I'm not working in studio, that when COVID is not bugging us, I'm usually doing live shows. And then I'm also working on putting together my audio for the first time.
So talk about how you got into music and writing. And second part to the question is, I know that you're an educator. What are you teaching?
So I'm teaching English as a second language, particularly I work with adults, and then I also work with kids that are high school age. many of whom want to study abroad. So I work with them as well, and my experience comes in there too.
Tell us how you got into music and writing.
I think I actually started writing poetry first, and this was primarily, I think at the time, I was very much an introvert. So having outlets to express myself, I felt like were very limited. So from that, I started writing poetry. And then I realized that I really sucked at poetry, especially when it came to my delivery. But I did realize that I could sing to that poetry. So I just started going with music, and that's what came naturally after that.
Well, before we get into your singing, let's talk about your new book. Tell us about your new book and tell us what it's about.
So the new book is a travel adventure memoir meets suspense. And it covers myself living, going through my life from Zimbabwe, and each chapter is broken down into a different country that I lived in, and the experiences that lead me to where I am now. And so this was, in a big way, I felt like it was important, especially for your atypical travelers like myself, travelers of color or travelers from countries that maybe aren't so well known around the world. I felt that it was important to showcase my story, even though I'm still very much living now. I felt that it was important to share that with the world.
Well, your music, you put out a professional LP. Kind of tell us about that LP and where people can get it and listen to it.
Right. So I did the EP. I released it towards the end of 2019. I think I'd been recording music for a long time, but I hadn't really put it together until I met a very good producer, a good friend of mine from the UK who also lives here in Vietnam. And so we started working on some stuff together, and I realized that, I had some potential there. And so over the course of a year, I worked on directing and filming my own videos, sort of 7 videos that we did. And then I also did the editing and also just the general funding of the entire project. So that took some time to complete. And then I also ended up touring as well. Ended up in Singapore, Hong Kong, played in a couple places in Cambodia as well, and a lot of places in Vietnam. And also made it back to Zimbabwe and performed a couple of shows there too. So it's been a busy couple of years.
Well, I like to do this to my musicians that I have on the show. Why don't you give us a little verse or something and let the listeners hear how you sound?
Okay. I could do. What's actually funny about this before I do it, I was watching an interview, a recent interview with Boys II Men, and they said they mentioned how much they hated it when someone in an interview asked them to do a little something. But I'm actually glad to do something. So I'll do a little piece from one of my songs called "How to Kill an Angel," and that's, you can find that anywhere on YouTube or Spotify or most of the major streaming services. You close her hand, you clear her wings, she ran from here, you captured her dream. We'll leave it there.
You got a good voice. Did you undergo any kind of voice training, or did it just come natural to you through practice?
It came natural to me. I had my background in singing is a little checkered because initially, when I was in elementary school, I loved playing soccer with my buddies, and they used to have choir practice at the same time. And so one day I was forced by the school principal to audition for the school choir, and I was begrudgingly recruited. And the major problem was that I now was no longer able to play soccer at that time. So what I actually did was I sabotaged my choir chances. I just didn't turn up a couple of times, and the head of the choir wasn't pleased with that, so she kicked me out of the choir. I went back to playing soccer, and then later on in life, I kind of rediscovered those singing roots again when I started singing to the poetry. So there was a relationship, on and off relationship early on with music in my life, but now it's much more consistent.
Do you have any upcoming projects that you're working on that people need to know about?
Right, yeah. So I'm currently working, as well as working on the audiobook, I'm also working on a soundtrack, actually 2 or 3 songs to accompany that. So I'll be promoting those singles soon. And probably by the end of the coming year, I'll have a full EP recorded again.
Okay. Now, the audio book, is this a different book from the book that you just put out, or is it just an audio version of it?
It's the audio version of the current one. There will be some updates, obviously, because some things have changed a little bit in my life. So the end chapters might be slightly different, but primarily it's the audio version of the current one.
How can people get in touch with you? Give out your contact information if you have any websites or any social media links.
Sure. You can find me on StewartGatsi.com. You can also find me on Instagram as well. I'm not much of a Twitter person, so you won't find me there. But pretty much everywhere else on YouTube, you can find the videos. The book, Rough Guide to Planet Earth, that's up on Amazon, so you can check that out as well. There's the preview that goes through as well. And it's also available on Kindle as well.
You have any final thoughts before we close it out? Any advice to give any wannabe travelers or writers or musicians or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that especially when it comes in life to traveling and doing the things that we want, I think there's a lot more out there for people to see. And if I could give everyone in America a gift, it would be a passport, a plane ticket to somewhere that they've never been before. Because I think that traveling really changes your life. It really does. And I say this with many of my American friends and family.
Ladies and gentlemen, StewartGatsi.com. Stewart, thank you so much for joining me today.
I really appreciate it, Curtis. Thank you for your time.
And listeners, please be sure to follow, rate, and review after listening. Android users, go to the Google Play Store and download the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast app. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.